I'm sure you can roast vegetables, but I want to show you 2 hacks that will take any roast vegetable to a restaurant level. How much extra time will this take? 2 minutes. You'll be shocked at how little effort and skill is required and how much improvement you'll get. In this video, I'll roast broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and carrots, but the same principles apply to any vegetable you might want to roast. The hacks boil down to adding a crunchy ingredient and a secret sauce. We'll get to them in a minute, but let's start in the beginning and learn the core techniques. Here are 6 things you need to know to roast well. When the vegetables don't brown, most people think that the culprit is their oven, but the culprit is most likely your baking sheet. These shiny sheet pans that are popular in the US do not brown well out of the box. This is the way you want them for your baked goods, your cookies, tarts, buns, etc. And this is the way you want them for roasting, splotchy and brown. Note that most of the seasoning is on the underside of my baking sheets. Even though it doesn't touch the food, it's just as effective at helping it brown. This dark color helps the baking sheet absorb the radiation produced by the oven, just like a dark t-shirt absorbs the radiation produced by the sun. How do you get your baking sheet to this state? I have a whole video on this. See the link in the description below. It's just like seasoning a cast iron skillet. If you don't want to season your baking sheets, don't buy these shiny ones for roasting. Instead, try something like William & Sonoma Gold Touch. That one browns well out of the box. There are tons of other baking sheets on the market, but I simply can't try them all. Does anyone out there have Caraway? How are they at browning? Please let me know in the comments below if you have them. If you wash your broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and cauliflower, you'll never be able to get all the water out, and your veg will steam instead of browning. Luckily, these varieties grow above ground and they aren't sandy, so there is no need to get them wet. If you are dealing with a root vegetable like a beet or a carrot, you should wash it to remove the sand. But those vegetables are smooth and easy to dry. If you're dealing with a leafy green like kale or chard, you should wash them because they tend to be very sandy. But leafy greens are not typically roasted. Flat surfaces are your friends. They increase the contact with the baking sheet and create more browning. Root veggies can be cut into sticks or wedges. For broccoli, trim the stem, set your broccoli tree upside down and cut off the thick branches. Then cut off the top florets. If some of them have scrawny stems, leave them as is. If the stems are thick, cut through them to create a flat surface, but stop at the florets. This prevents the messy green crumbs that you'll produce if you cut all the way. If the piece is too big, cut it in half to make it easier to eat. See, like this. Cut and pull. Cut and pull. Broccoli stems are delicious, but their skin is often too fibrous, so it's best to cut it off. I don't bother pulling out the peeler for this and just hack it off with a knife. Then cut the stem into small dice. If you're working with Brussels sprouts, trim their stems and then cut them in half. Get rid of the stems, but keep the leaves. We'll roast them and turn them into crispy chips. Put your vegetable into a bowl and sprinkle it with salt. If you're working with a vegetable like broccoli, be careful to spread the salt out evenly so that it doesn't get trapped in a few florets. For years, I resisted using a bowl and coated my vegetables with salt and oil right in the baking sheet to save myself some dishes. But that was a mistake. That might work okay for smooth vegetables like carrots, but not for something like broccoli. Without a bowl, it's very hard to coat the florets in oil well enough to prevent them from turning unpleasantly charred and dry. You see the difference in color? Emerald green is the part that was oiled, and gray green is the part that wasn't. When you use a bowl, the oil accumulates on the bottom, and it's a lot easier to dunk the florets into it to get them thoroughly coated. A standard half sheet will need 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of oil, so don't be stingy. Oil is what lets your vegetable turn beautifully caramelized instead of burnt. Even with flat surfaces, the vegetables won't make perfect contact with the baking sheet. Unless you fill all those nooks and crannies with oil, some parts will be burnt and some parts will be pale. In most cases, I use extra virgin olive oil for its flavor, but refined oil will work too, and it might give you a tiny bit more crispness. So I'll use it for Brussels sprouts to produce really crispy leaves. Here is another oil strategy that works well when you want very solid browning. Put half of the oil into the bowl with the vegetables and half of the oil on the baking sheet. This gives more oil to the bottom than to the top. I find this to be a useful technique for Brussels sprouts, but not for broccoli. For broccoli, I want to give plenty of oil to the florets, and I don't mind sacrificing a bit of the bottom color. Once your vegetables are oiled, arrange them on the baking sheet, cut side down. For Brussels sprouts, I am holding back the loose leaves since they cook too fast. Typically, I roast at 450 and only turn down the heat if my vegetables aren't tender enough by the time they are brown. This temperature assumes well-seasoned baking sheets. If yours are freshly seasoned, you might need an even higher temperature. Placing your baking sheets in the bottom third of the oven instead of in the middle can help with browning since you'll be closer to the heating element. But what about convection fan? Won't it speed up browning? It will, but not always in the right place. You want most of the browning to happen on the bottom where the vegetable meets the pan. But the convection fan mostly browns the top where the vegetable blisters and dries out. How much of this you want depends on the vegetable. In the case of carrots, some top blistering is lovely. With the convection fan, I don't even need to stir them. But in the case of broccoli and Brussels sprouts, too much top blistering is bad. I find that it's best to start without convection and only turn it on toward the end for a final browning boost. But you'll have to play with your oven to see what works for you. How long does it take to get the color on the bottom? It depends on many factors, so keep a close eye. I cooked my carrots for 15 minutes without convection and another 5 with convection. If you don't have a convection fan, you'll need to stir them and roast them until they brown on the other side. I cooked my broccoli for 12 minutes without convection and 2 with convection. Since these veggies don't need to be perfectly brown to be good, I was satisfied with what I got without stirring, especially that I used the convection fan. Brussels sprouts are a different story. They require much more tender love and care. I first roasted the sprout halves for 8 minutes without convection. When the outer pieces started to brown, I got the sprouts out of the oven and rearranged them. See how the center ones are completely pale? That's normal. The outer pieces always brown faster. With carrots and broccoli, that's not a biggie, but a pale Brussels sprout is unacceptable in my house. For Brussels sprouts, I want every single one roasty and toasty, so I rearrange them a bit. You don't need to drive yourself crazy and move every single sprout, but it's good to move the pieces that are in the center of the baking sheet to the outside and move the pieces from the corners into the center, since they are the darkest by now. This is also the right time to add the leaves and all the remaining oil from the bowl. Try to separate them and spread them out evenly to give them the best chance at browning. Let's put the pan back in the oven for another 5 to 7 minutes, and now we have perfect sprouts, nicely brown with crispy leaves. Now you can pat yourself on the back because you've learned to make good roasted veggies. But are we going to stop at good? Of course not. So let's talk about those 2-minute hacks that will really up your game. It will probably come as no surprise that most savory food needs a splash of acidity. It's the sour taste. The obvious way to add it is to give your roasted veggies a splash of lemon or vinegar before serving them. The problem is that it makes the veggies soggy. So I want to propose a better way that is just as efficient. Take a squeeze bottle and add a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, a tablespoon of honey, and a tablespoon of olive oil. Cover and shake. Dijon mustard and honey are not only delicious, but they act as emulsifiers and produce a very viscous, creamy sauce. You drizzle this on your veggies, and they taste way more balanced and complex without being soggy. A squeeze bottle is great because it makes the sauce easy to store, it keeps in the fridge indefinitely, and easy to distribute evenly. But if you don't have a squeeze bottle, you can certainly whisk the vinegar, Dijon, and honey in a little bowl and then slowly drizzle in the oil while whisking constantly. Keep whisking until you get this lovely thick sauce. Another option is a milk frother. You can put all the ingredients into a jar and whip. This option is also very good for storage, but not as great at distribution as the squeeze bottle. Since I use this sauce so frequently, I usually make a double batch, and if I am running low, I don't even bother washing the bottle every time. I just make more sauce on top of the old sauce. Roast veggies are rather soft, so if you want to turn them into an interesting dish, you need to give them a crunchy contrast. In restaurants, cooks usually use a deep fryer to crisp up everything from quinoa to shallots. It's delicious, but a huge pain in the ass. A few years ago, I made videos on how to make crispy shallots and crispy quinoa, and do you know how often I've done it since making those videos? Maybe once. If I can't bring myself to put this much effort into a topping, I bet most home cooks can't either. That's why I now use store-bought fried shallots that are available in Asian markets and on Amazon. If you can't find them, try crispy fried onions sold in regular supermarkets. You know, the stuff people put on a green bean casserole. When I first tried to use store-bought shallots, I found them lacking in flavor. But that can be easily fixed by reviving them in the oven. My second crunchy component is this, pumpkin seeds. Unlike nuts, they don't need chopping, so they are quick and easy to use. As all seeds and nuts, I store them in the freezer so that they don't go rancid. I like to buy mine toasted and salted. They have way more flavor than the raw, unsalted seeds. There is no need to dirty another pan to revive your shallots and pumpkin seeds. As soon as your veggies are done, turn down the oven to 400 and turn off the convection fan. Sprinkle your veg with both of your crunchies and put in the oven for 1 to 2 minutes. Be careful not to burn the shallots. If you see even the slightest hint of darkening, get the pan out of the oven. Okay, let's put it all together. Reshake your sauce, drizzle it on the plate, tap with the veggies, and drizzle on more sauce. These veggies are so spectacular, it's a shame to serve them as a side. I think they deserve their own course. They even taste great after they cool off, so it's a great dish to make for a party. One final note, I organized the footage in this video by technique, like cutting, oiling, and roasting, not by the vegetable. In real life, you don't want to mix your vegetables with salt and oil until you are ready to roast them because they'll turn soggy. So the way this video was actually shot was that I did all the steps for carrots, then for broccoli, and then for Brussels sprouts. While working on this video, I also answered the question that's been bugging me about carrots. Which ones are better? The big ones or the little ones? But that's a topic for the next video. Here are more very detailed culinary tutorials for you to check out. And if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.